I'm back. I was gone for a week. You probably thought I was on vacation, didn't you? My volume's a little high here. You probably thought I was taking a nice long vacation on the beach, but you'd be wrong. I felt like crap for about a week, so I couldn't do the show. And on the third or fourth day, I thought, you know what? I'd better go get a COVID test because this doesn't feel like anything I've had before. I was feeling very flu-y. I felt like I had a fever, but no fever. Anyway, I don't want to bore you with all the details of that. That's why I wasn't here for a week. I wanted to do a 9/11 show, 9/11 video on 9/11, but to be honest with you, I just didn't feel good enough. I didn't feel like I would have done a good enough job had I done it when I was in that shape. So I have to do it now. And I know everyone's kind of over the 9/11, not over it, but you don't want to hear about it. You know, everyone kind of takes a day to watch all the specials, to remember. But anyway, I'm going to do the 9/11. I'm going to talk about 9/11 today. Mostly because it was such a formative event for me. It was the event that got me interested in politics. I was about 9 or 10 years old. And it kind of dawned on me when I was watching the coverage last week that there are a lot of people who are almost in their 20s now who weren't alive for it. Not just don't remember, they weren't even alive for it. And then I started to feel frustrated because I thought to myself, well, this is not being taught. What is happening is not being taught. It wasn't for me, at least. You don't discuss it in class. You don't discuss who is behind it. I mean, that would be a controversy in and of itself. People wouldn't even be able to agree on who was behind it. It's not taught. So these young people who have no recollection of it or who weren't alive for it aren't going to know what happened unless we remind them. And I'm not one to be sharing on social media all the time for awareness of this and awareness of that. Most of it's social justice stuff, which I, of course, don't partake in. But I think on 9/11, it's important that on Instagram, on Facebook, and whatever social media becomes popular here, there, forth, we have to remind people what happened. We have to show them what happened. That's another thing. You watch on the news, they don't really show a lot of footage. I think Fox News did, but a lot of the channels don't show anything. They don't show, for example, the man jumping out of the building. You think, why do you want to show that? Do we want our kids seeing that? Yeah, we do. Because it's so easy for all this just to get forgotten. And it's so easy for it to become an event similar to like a bad hurricane, not an actual terror attack, an act of war. For example, Pearl Harbor. How many people even know what day Pearl Harbor happened on? Never mind think about it on the day of, or I'm not going to say relive it, but try to relive it as best they can, even though they weren't alive for that time, or try and understand it. Nobody does. And that's sort of the fault of people who just didn't want to keep reminding people of it. Now, I know, time goes on. It is a very important thing to remember. It's a very important thing to explain to people how bad it was, the carnage, the death, the anxiety in the United States and throughout the world following that day. And the only way we can do that really is through social media, because the news isn't going to do it. And the education system certainly isn't going to do it. And we can't even rely on kids' parents anymore to do it, because people have busy lives. They don't want to depress their kids. They don't want to bore their kids. So through social media, you have to remind people. And not just a remembrance, not just a shot of the skyline. You need to include some visuals. You need to show them how bad it was. They need to understand, whether it's a video of the plane going into the building. And I know a lot of people are watching this and going, well, we don't really need to, depress people with that. I think you do. I think the only way to catch their attention and for them to go, whoa, wait a second, and then maybe research it, maybe look into it more, and in the end be more educated about what happened that day, that's the only way, in my opinion. So it's not taught in schools. It's not on the news. We have to do it. We have to remind people. Last time I was in New York City to visit the Ground Zero was quite a while ago. It was 2006. They were still kind of cleaning up. And I was very interested in politics by that time. Again, 9/11 was what got me interested. I started watching CNN. And I noticed too, right after it, I was only 10 at the time, but I noticed how if I tried to discuss it with teachers or in school or anything like that, it was always America was to blame. It was never, and I always found that strange, and that's what sort of pushed me over to the right side, and many, many, many more things after that have resulted in my political beliefs being what they are now. But that was the start of it. I do think back, it's sort of like I would never have started playing hockey if Wayne Gretzky hadn't retired, because I happened to be watching his final game, and that's what got me interested. And I often think I may not be interested in politics if 9/11 hadn't happened. It was a formative event for me. So getting back to my story, when I was in New York City, I was there with my family and one friend. I was interested in all this stuff. So we were at Ground Zero watching. It was just sort of a big gaping hole. And we went into a deli to get something to eat and a drink. And being the sort of inquisitive person that I was and still am, I asked the man sitting at a table. He was an older man. I'd say about maybe 70 something. And this is right across the street from Ground Zero. So I asked him if he was here, and I asked him to explain what the day was like. And he told me how awful it was. He told me he ended up a block away, being blown a block away. I don't know. Maybe he's exaggerating. He probably wasn't, because we were discussing it. It was fascinating. He was talking about how they needed to let people in for shelter, and there's lots of pictures all on the walls in there. I forget the name of the deli, but I do have it somewhere. So when I finish this video, I will include that. You can go check it out if you live in New York City, if it's still there. But anyway, he said, hold on a second. If you're this interested in all this stuff, I have something to show you. And he goes to his car, which was parked just outside the store, and he pulls out a cross made of steel that was melted down from the rubble of the World Trade Center. Thinking back to it, I almost feel the emotion coming over me thinking about it, because the fact that he took the time to show me was great, but I'm looking at this cross, and it was very moving. I have a picture with him with the cross. When you actually talk to someone who was there, you really feel the heartache. But something else I also felt talking to that man. Now, this was when I was I was maybe 13 or 14. Something else you felt was the need to build it back up. Remember, this was 2006. This is before they rebuilt it. And he told me, look, we're going to rebuild, and this was his words. It was true New York style. We're going to rebuild, and we're going to rebuild it taller for the whole world to see. You really felt how proud he was of his country, that New York City came through. And it was just a fascinating thing for me to have been a part of, to be able to. I'm really glad I piped up and said something. So, whenever you're somewhere on a trip or what have you, and you want to know more, or you feel this something telling you, whether it's God telling you or something else telling you, talk to this person, ask this. But you should do it, as hard as it is, because it can lead to something like this. So anyway, I wanted to do a video on 9/11. And speaking of young people, because this is, the reason why I wanted us to keep sharing it on social media and all that is for young people, because a lot of them weren't alive. And I came across a video on YouTube the other night, because that's all you can do when you're not feeling well. You just spend the whole day on YouTube. By the way, I have not got my result back yet, so we'll find that out soon. But Vic The Catholic Kid is the name of the channel that I saw this video on. The video is called #WalkAway, Why My First Vote Ever Will Be Republican. The video has 82,000 views and counting now. It's quite long. I think it's 20-something minutes, but it is worth every second for you to watch this video. She's explaining how she used to be very liberal. She lives in a very liberal city in California. She didn't disclose where, and we know why. She used to be very liberal, and she used to mock and kind of laugh at the other side. And she had all these theories about how right-wingers were, why conservatives thought the way they thought. They're racist, they're sexist, blah, blah, blah. You should watch the video. She explains it all in detail. But the takeaway, I'll leave the link to her channel and to her video in the description of this video. But the thing I took away from the whole video she made was she talked about what brought her over to the right side of politics. And those of us on this side, we often think if we could just argue well enough, if we could just articulate our position in a way that would convince people, they would see it the way we see it. But she says something that was quite fascinating. She talked about how it wasn't so much because she said she would get into debates with campus conservatives and things like that, maybe in high school. She would listen to their arguments, but it wasn't the argument necessarily that won her over. It was the optics, the demeanor of these people. She talked about how the people on the other side, the conservatives, were well dressed. They were calm. They made their arguments in a very confident manner that wasn't angry, that wasn't hysterical. She said another thing that struck me. She said that the other side, the conservatives she talked to, they seemed so happy. And that really caught me. When she said that, I almost had to pause the video and think about that because, it is something I have noticed when talking about politics with people on the left. That's not everybody. I mean, I have many friends who are on the left and they're totally, much smarter than I am and have their lives together and are not angry or not hysterical. But there is an element of the left-wing argument. And you often hear this said about right-wingers, the angry white men and this and that. But if you look at the left, there's a lot of anger. There's so much anger at the system. There's anger at God, if they even believe in God. And she said what she saw on the right was people who were happy, who were living happy lives. They didn't hate their country. They didn't hate the system. They didn't hate other people or people who had done better. They were quite content. And I think it's an important lesson because, we can argue with people till we're blue in the face, but oftentimes that's not what's going to move them. What's going to move them is how we act and how we portray our arguments. And I've talked about this before, our composure, how we present ourselves. Are we happy? Are we angry? Are we resentful? Those things matter. And when people on the left see us making an argument and see that we are the happy warriors, as Andrew Breitbart used to say, we need to be happy warriors. There's a reason for that, because people are attracted to happy warriors. It doesn't mean we can't be intense, and doesn't mean we can't be angry at stuff that we see as degenerative or bad for the country. But we have to be happy warriors. We have to present ourselves in a way that makes people want to come over to our side. If we're just a bunch of angry people yelling and screaming about what's wrong with the country and why, the left doesn't believe this and this is wrong and that's wrong and just constantly hand-wringing, we're not going to win people over, because it's not just the argument that wins people over. It's how we make the argument. It's our demeanor, as I say. It's our overall vibe. And we have to have good vibes if we're going to win people over. So I found that very interesting. The whole video, you should go watch it. It's a great, she's a young Catholic woman, and she came to the right. She explained herself very well. You could tell she was a little bit nervous making the argument, as would anybody who makes these arguments publicly, because we know how the other side acts, and we know that they cancel culture is alive and well. But I think she will find that she is going to make many new friends she wouldn't have otherwise made. And another thing that's obvious about it is she does seem content. She does seem happy. When she's explaining her coming to the right, she doesn't get angry at the other side. She spends more time explaining why the right just drew her in. And there were a lot of attributes about these people, their happiness and how they made arguments in a calm manner. Those things matter. We can't be hysterical. We can't be crazy. We can be idiosyncratic. We can be fun. People talk about Alex Jones. If only Alex Jones were to make his arguments in a different way, maybe people would listen. But it's okay to be entertaining. It's okay to have a personality. But it's the anger that drives people away. I'm glad to be back. More videos to come. I'm sorry for the whole week that I was off. But there'll be lots more. There's so much to talk about. I wanted to make this 9/11 video, and I know it's like 5 days later or whatever, but I thought it was an important important point, I will post the link to that video I was talking about from Vic the Catholic Kid in the description. Please subscribe. I hate asking for you to subscribe, but please subscribe, like the video, comment. Please get into arguments in the comments. Stir things up.